Tracy McBeath. You may have seen her in a few of our posts. Tracy recently hosted the first women's only virtual summit, the Low Carb Lifestyle Weekend, with a list of esteemed LCHF experts. You can access the content in the description box. We've got that link below. I'm really looking forward to chatting to you a little bit more about that later on, Tracy. Tracy is, as I've mentioned, a mind-body health coach. She's based in Australia. After 12 years as a personal trainer, she made the change to health coaching. After her own health started to deteriorate, she first became a banting coach through RMR and then went on to become a nutrition network advisor and is also a 3-principle practitioner. She works mainly with women, helping them with lifestyle changes that are needed when switching to a low-carb lifestyle. She runs an LCHF lifestyle coaching program with Dr. Jackie. I am not going to attempt the surname again. There we go. And, I tried to clear that up before the live, but I'm not. It's left my brain. Thank you for clearing that up. And she's also the host of a health podcast, Health Evolution. So Tracy, like I mentioned, so great to have you here. I'm really looking forward to sharing your content today. Over the last few weeks, we've covered a host of topics around ensuring that we stay committed to maintaining a healthy body given the current circumstances. And we know that once you adopt an LCHF lifestyle, it doesn't come without its challenges. And that's what we're focusing on today. Today's topic focuses on the challenges that come with following and committing to an LCHF lifestyle. But Tracy is going to be addressing it from a coach's perspective to assist other practitioners and coaches to successfully help your clients and patients navigate through them. If you have any questions, any comments, please submit them in the comment section below. I've mentioned this previously. We're committed to providing you with as much training and support to help your learning and to aid in your learning. So we'd like to hear from you. What are some of the other topics that you'd like us to cover in these weekly sessions? So please feel free to drop that in the comments section as well. If you aren't part of our network as yet and you'd love to earn a professional certification in LCHF and keto nutrition, please check out our list of trainings in the link in the description box. Tracy, again, thank you so much for making yourself available. We've got Francois from South Africa, Carmel as well. Thank you guys so much for joining. I'm now going to hand over to Tracy. If you have any questions, please submit that in the comment section. Tracy, the floor is all yours.
Oh, exciting. Well, again, thank you so much for inviting me to come and chat with you all today. It's such an honor. I know that we're going to talk a little bit at the end around the summit, but yes, I guess hosting that was just the highlight of my career to date. It was, inspired, well, even before COVID, sort of came along. It was in the plans, this virtual summit, and I think it sort of all sort of worked together that it had come at the right time, and it was so well received. And I think what I loved most about it is I had so many emails from women who really got so much out of it, but women who weren't even in the low carb space, who hadn't really tried low carb, maybe hadn't heard of it, but who were just hearing about it for the first time. And I think that's just what I guess to me was just the biggest highlight from that we were able to move out of, I guess the bubble that is low carb space, the low carb space. So certainly in Australia, there's a great low carb community, but you move outside of that and then, the knowledge is very, very limited around the potential of the lifestyle. So that was just, a huge highlight. So one of the things I do as a coach is, I really support general practitioners in helping their patients with lifestyle change, as well as obviously my own clients. So as Masuda mentioned, it was my own personal health journey that led me down low carb, as it was for many of you probably listening as well. And it's one of those things, once you see the change and feel the change, you can't go back. And I knew as a personal trainer, I wasn't really able to help people as best that I could, which is why I went down the health coaching path. But, relationships to me, prior to kids and then I was in HR. So I've always worked with people. I've always had a passion for people, and, you know, building relationships has always been really important to me. And that has allowed me to build some great relationships with some GPs in the low carb space and other practitioners, but predominantly GPs. So when I was invited to do this talk and had sort of decided on the topic, I reached out to them and asked them to share with me what, from their perspective, do they see as the biggest challenges, both for them as the GP, but also from the client's perspective in terms of making lifestyle change. So I sort of collated all those together, and I've come up with, I guess, eight of the common ones that were sort of said by all of them. And what I thought I would do is I would go through them and then, I guess, point to how I would look at it from a coach. So what are some of the thinking around, you know, looking at this from a perspective of change, because that's what we're all about. And it's change that is, you know, can be very, very confronting, can be very, very scary. And I guess over the years, I've learned a few things in terms of making it not seem as scary as it might. So the 8 things that they talked about were so the first one was the sheer volume of information that they need to impart to their client. I'm just going to go through the list and then I'll go through it in a bit more detail. The second one is a fear of being reported. It's still very much an issue here in Australia. Number 3 was a lack of desire for the patient to actually want to change. Number 4 is financial constraints by the patient. Number 5 was cultural differences. Number 6 was belief in widespread myths like breakfast is the most important meal of the day, 6 meals a day to keep your metabolism high, fat makes you fat, eat the food pyramid, fruit is healthy, and calories in, calories out. So obviously, you know, I'm sure there as well, still very much prevailing myths. When other practitioners who follow the conventional guidelines may contradict what you say. So often a GP will recommend their patient go to a specialist, and then, you know, they're told something contradictory to what that GP has been saying to them. And the last one was conflicting advice on social media and in the general public. So I'm going to go through each of those and just look at it from a coach's perspective, and as I said, and just see if there might be some new ideas around how we could deal with those. And I'm sure you are sitting there with your own issues, and I would absolutely love it if you would, you know, post or comment, you know, what is an issue for you, and if we can get to that, you know, I'd love to give you my perspective on that. And then if we've got time at the end, you know, what are some of the big things that I've had to go through, I guess, and how, what do I see in terms of my day when I have a person sitting in front of me, you know, wanting to change. So I guess the first thing we need to be aware is that, you know, of what is actually in our control and what isn't. So sometimes it can be not very clear and we can get a little bit confused about that. So for example, while we have the responsibility to do the right thing by all our patients or our clients and put all the cards on the table, ultimately the responsibility is theirs and it's not yours. So that was a really big thing for me to embrace, because I used to take it quite personally if I wasn't, in my view, successful with a client. But I realized a lot of stuff around change that has helped me with that. So, you know, it is our job to support and to show them options, but ultimately the change has to come from them and they have to take that responsibility. So many people do choose for one reason or another not to want to change. So I know personally of people who have gone to a low carb GP and the low carb GP has suggested lifestyle change and they're not interested. They either go and see somebody else or they just say they just want the pill. Just give me the pills. It's all too hard, and out the door they go. So, you know, I think that's actually quite common, and there's probably very little that we can do from that except keep the door open and just hope that they come back and that, you know, you can continue just to you know, provide them with the support that they do need. So with the sheer volume of information, so there's definitely a lot of information that, you know, we need to impart to someone when they're starting down the road of low carb. But, you know, I personally would be very careful with the potential of overwhelm, because I think we can give too much and it just is all too hard. And instead of starting, they just don't. So what, you know, I've certainly had patients or clients sitting in front of me who have been to low carb GPs and they have just felt that. Just too overwhelming, just given all the documents, sent on their way, and, you know, they just don't know where to start. And, you know, I liken it to, you know, the elephant. You know, you would never give someone an elephant and say, go ahead and eat it all at once. It's too much, it's overwhelming. It's more about breaking it down into smaller chunks. So what I think is really, really helpful here is to really meet the patient where they are at. So, you know, a lot of the time you know, we're up here, we've experienced, you know, great change in our health, and we really, really want that patient to be there too. But they're not always going to be where we want them to be, and we really need to be down where they are. And if they're just starting out, if this is the first time they've ever heard anything about low carb, I think it's really, really important to just break it down into one step at a time. You know, what are the biggest red flags? Which one of those is possible for them to look at first for change? Which one is doable? And if you ask them, they'll be able to tell you, you know, which one they can look at first. So Dr. Jackie Montefiore, which you mentioned at the start, she is someone who I work very closely with. So she found this was one of her issues as a low carb GP. And she just found that she was giving, you know, the same information over and over, and the volumes of it over and over. So she created this online program where she could offer it to her patients, and she asked me to come on board in terms of helping with the coaching. So that was her way of working a way around that. Now, of course, everyone's not going to be able to do that. But of course, there's so much online now, as we know, so many fantastic resources. And there are, you know, other membership programs that, you know, people can join to get the support. I think it's just really, really important that they do have the support. In the early days, it can be, and even, you know, 6 months down the track, it can be really, really challenging. And there are so many challenges that can come up. And I think, you know, I know some GPs just feel they don't have the time to give them the support. And of course, it's not always, you know, it's not our job to be all things to them anyway. So, but I think it's important to understand that, break it down, smaller pieces, meet them where they're at, and make sure that they do get the support outside of seeing you. And that's where I think, you know, the Nutrition Network advisors and coaches, health coaches, can really, really bridge that gap with helping with change. We all know how busy, you know, practitioners are, and, you know, it is really about that relationship. And if you don't have the time to build that relationship, to really find out where they are, then I would highly recommend that, you know, you do direct them to someone like me, I guess, that can help. The fear of being reported. So, as I said, it's a very, very real fear here in Oz. And I do know a lot of practitioners who actually do practice low carb, but they do not, they're not obvious about it. So you won't find them on our low carb down under list or in any of the practitioner list. So it is really a fear. And, you know, I mean, I guess essentially we are still going against the grain, because low carb is still outside of the dietary guidelines. And it's not been, you know, they've not been allowed yet to make it a viable option for people. So this is one of the biggest reasons why I actually organised the summit, because I think we need to speak out more and more about it, because I think ultimately that helps our patients. You know, I really just believe that we are soldiers of the truth, and we must call out vested interest in health. And we need to just share the potential of the improved health that comes with this lifestyle. So of course, you know, Professor Tim Noakes and our Dr. Gary Fettke have both been through the ringer for speaking out and advocating for a lower carb lifestyle. But the trial of Professor Tim Noakes and the APRA investigation of Gary Fettke has put the low carb principles on trial 2 and low carb 1. So there's zero doubt that, you know, as to the science behind the principles and the potential to change health. So we do need to talk about it. But this is what I was saying, you know, so often I think we're just talking to the converted, you know, we stay in our circles, we just stay with the people that we know understand the low carb lifestyle. But, and it can be scary to speak out, and it does take a lot of courage to speak out to people that, you know, may not necessarily embrace the low carb lifestyle. But, you know, as long as we're practicing ethically, and we've, you know, the great course of ethics through the Nutrition Network, which if you haven't done, I highly recommend that you do. And, you know, you follow advice in those programs, then you will be covered. Dr. David Unwin spoke at the Low Carb Down Under conference in October in Australia last year. And he has documented for the last 10 years all his patients' results. And he's gathered all this data, and that's what he encouraged all the doctors that were there at the conference last year to do, to document, because you can't deny the results when they're down in black and white like that. So that was, you know, I think we just need to speak. We just need to keep speaking. So number 3 was a lack of desire on the patient's behalf to change. Now this is, I guess, what I call my bread and butter. This is the stuff that I do a lot with my patients. It does come down to understanding habit change and understanding how change works. So of course you can't change anyone who doesn't want to change. So that's impossible. If someone comes to you and they don't want to change, there isn't very little you can do, but it doesn't mean that you don't give up. So you don't want them to walk out the door and not come back to you because they don't feel that you're supporting them, or you're wanting to push something that they don't want onto them. So you want them to keep coming back to you so you can support them where they are now. And it's really, really important just to keep planting the seed through building a relationship. So change is a really funny thing. What it usually requires is an insight, and that is a change in thinking. So it is rarely more knowledge that people need. They need to see that their fear not to change is often unfounded, and that with time and increasing awareness, there will be new thinking that will take its place. So what our mind is usually full of is habitual thought that is rarely helpful. So habitual thought might look like, I can't do it, it's too hard, what will they think of me, I can't give up beer and pizza with the boys, I can't afford it, fat makes me fat, I can't cook, I have no money. There's so many that, you know, and obviously that's very, very individual. The list could go on. But that's the thought that is habitual. It goes on and on. And while we're listening to that, there is very little space to see something new and to see change. So this is where I come in, you know, unless we see thought for what it is, we will take that habitual stuff as gospel, as fact, and as truth that we must blindly follow, and we won't have any space to entertain new thinking. But by far the biggest gifts we can give our patients or our clients is compassion and understanding. So understanding that they're actually doing the best they can with the thinking that they actually have, that looks and feels really, really real to them. And until that changes, change is going to be very, very difficult. So often I have clients sitting, you know, in front of me who have been dieting and restricting for majority of their adult life. So, you know, change is really, really difficult when over 40, 50 years, there's been a whole lot of belief systems and a whole lot of habits built up. And until we start to see that we don't have to pay attention to that, it is really, really hard. But once we do see that we don't have to pay attention to that, and we open up space for a whole lot of new stuff to come in, then change will happen. But the thing is, that doesn't happen overnight. That does take time, and that does take relationship and support and compassion. So keeping the door open. So keep meeting them where they are, keep planting the seed. And over time, they might start to see things differently and become a lot more curious. And it's really important too, as I've mentioned at the start, remember that their choices are not a reflection of you as a practitioner or of me as a coach. So their choices are a reflection of their thinking at that time, and that is it. Just have a little drink. So number 4 was financial constraints. So money can be a huge limiting factor to change, whether that is real or imagined. So there are many very expensive coaches and practitioners out there. Generally, many people can't afford it. A lot of the time we think we need a whole lot of support crew. So, you know, it's not just the GP, but it's the coach or the naturopath or the other practitioners that we, you know, are often told are needed, you know, in terms of change. And a lot of people genuinely can't afford that. But it's really, really great, I think, with, you know, social media now, that there are a lot of cheaper options out there. And obviously Facebook groups are fantastic if you can find the one that is, you know, your tribe and is the one for you, because there are obviously some out there that probably aren't for everybody. Online groups and networks. I just think there are more choices, and we need to point our clients to, our patients to, these other choices if money is a factor. The interesting thing is I often have clients, you know, reach out to me and they'll say, oh, hi Tracy, you know, I've been following you on Instagram for about 6 months now, and you know, like they watch, they build a, you know, they look at who you are, what you do, what you talk about. But it does take time for them to really reach out and say, now I'm ready for change. And I think we just have to give people that time and that space to make that change. So cultural differences. So this, again, can be a barrier with patients. But again, as I said, time, education, compassion, and support can really, really help in shifting this. And I think you'll be amazed at what lands with clients and patients sometimes. Often it's not what you think. And sometimes, you know, they'll walk out the door and you'll think, oh, you know, they haven't heard anything. But they might come back again in a month's time and they may have made some changes. So again, you know, if you, you know, don't give up. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Because you'll never know that one time or that one thing that you might say that might plant the seed, and then, you know, they might hear it again, or they might hear it from somebody else, and it might actually land with them. So something like a cultural shift is quite difficult because it's very obviously ingrained. And, you know, something like rice, you know, to try and say to someone from an Asian background that they shouldn't eat rice, well, that can be very difficult. But again, if you keep the door open, you know, or suggest smaller steps in other directions. So is there somewhere else you can start? Is there soft drink, or is it sugar, or something else that they can start first to get momentum going? And then often over time, you know, things will slowly shift again. But of course, you know, it's just understanding, like all behavior, it comes from a habit. So it just comes from something that's all they know. They don't know anything else other than that. And we just have to be supportive and compassionate and just, I guess, keep chipping away and, you know, create that awareness for a shift and for a change. So number 6 was long held beliefs of widespread myths. Now this one is very, very challenging from the perspective of the patient and the practitioner. So of course, breakfast being the most important meal of the day was something I believed in for a very long time, and told a lot of my personal training clients that they had to have breakfast. They couldn't come training without breakfast. Make sure you have a banana before you come to training. Make sure you're eating 6 meals a day so your metabolism doesn't drop. Don't eat fat. Fat makes you fat. There are so many out there that I think we all know that they're not based on science, but they are so widely still believed in, and it can definitely be a barrier to change. So the good news here is that everyone watching this live video held those beliefs for a long time too. And as I said, I know I certainly did. But we all, for one reason or another, eventually came to see them as the myths that they are. We might be able to see through knowledge that they are false, but again, if we don't change our thinking about them, it will keep coming back and haunting us. So it didn't happen overnight for me, and I'm guessing it probably didn't happen overnight for you either. So like most change, we want it to happen quickly and we want that light bulb moment, but it generally doesn't happen that way. It happens in increments, it happens slowly. So I've been living this lifestyle for nearly 7 years now, and I'm pretty sure it took me 2 years to think I wasn't giving my kids or setting my kids up for a heart attack by putting butter in the pan and cooking their bacon and eggs in butter. It did take some time for me to overcome that. And I think that is how it is with everybody. It's not an overnight thing. You know, I grew up thinking fat made you fat. And the first time I heard it didn't, I think I was like, oh, that's just absolute rubbish. So, you know, with a combination of knowledge, with a combination of trust, I guess, finding people I trusted, really learning the knowledge, really learning the science and putting it into practice. And I saw obviously over time that I was eating fat, but I was losing weight. So how did that work? So again, you've just got to give people time to make these changes. It doesn't happen overnight. And I come back again to support knowledge, time and open door, patience and space is what is needed to allow someone to see some new things around this. But you know, linked to that is what about the myths that are continually being perpetuated by other practitioners? So many of my GP colleagues report sending their patients to a specialist only to hear the opposite of what they've told them. So they've had patients come back to them and their specialist has told them to stop eating fat and go back to eating oats and to go on statins. And this can be obviously very, very challenging. And there's not always a low carb option. Certainly here in Australia with some specialties, a low carb specialist is quite thin on the ground. So this is another reason why I believe we have to keep speaking out about this to our non-believing colleagues. And I want to share a little bit of a story here on how something new that may help around this, because it is a challenge and it is something that I think that we, as low carb fans, need to address. And there's something I've seen in this that might be helpful, and it was taught to me by one of my mentors and teachers, Michael Neal. So he started by saying to me, have you ever wondered how it is possible that seemingly intelligent people disagree with you? Well, I suppose there's 3 possible explanations to this. Number 1, they're a little bit confused, and when they come to their senses, they will agree with you. Number 2, they're not as intelligent as you thought they were. And number 3, and possibly a much more accurate explanation, is that we all live in separate realities. So we think the mind works like a camera, accurately recording what's going on in the world around us. But in actuality, the mind works more like a projector. So it projects our thoughts onto the screen of our consciousness, and then we experience that created world through our senses. So this is why someone can apparently look at the same thing, but see something very, very different. So we're not actually looking at the same thing. We're looking at it through our own thought created reality. So I'm looking at mine and you're looking at yours. And you see it so often. You have 10 people stand in a row in front of a field, and one person will see weeds, one person will see beauty, one person will see this. You know, we're all different, but that's just how it works in terms of our reality. And when you understand that, you start to see, look, we're all right because we're all coming from our own reality. And understanding that can really open up to changing others. So when we know this, we can see that everyone is doing the best they can given the thinking that they have that looks real to them. And that is you, and that is me, and that is your patients. So you can't change someone's mind without first opening up your own. So what do they see that you don't? What babies of wisdom and truth are you throwing out with the bathwater of their rhetoric? So Michael shared with me this master strategy for increasing your intelligence and becoming more influential with others. And I'm definitely still working on this, but you know, I just love this so much, and I just see this as such an issue in the low carb space. So that's why I'm sharing it. But I'm certainly not, you know, not that anyone's perfect at anything, but it's a work in progress for me as well. So excuse the word here, but I'm just quoting Michael here. He says, find someone you recognize not to be a complete moron, and I'm sorry about that word, but who disagrees with you, and really listen to them. So now, of course, we don't need to worry about those who disagree with you because of their ignorance or a hidden agenda, because there's plenty of people out there too. We know that. And don't worry about getting your view across. You'll be able to do that more powerfully once you recognize that it's just a point of view. So try it. Find one person that you really rate, but they disagree with you. Maybe it's a colleague who, you know, my friend Jackie talks about, you know, seemingly really intelligent people that still argue the cholesterol myth. Well, maybe you respect them, and maybe you just don't understand why they still think that. But maybe you can try and connect with them to see why they still think that way. And that keeps the door open to eventually influencing them as well, because they'll be interested in how you think the way that you do. And the last one was conflicting advice on social media and the media in general. So going back to what I just said about separate realities. So we're always going to have this. Given what I just talked about, you know, there's 7.8 billion people on the planet, which means we have 7.8 billion separate realities. So difference is a given. And I think I like to encourage my clients to be their own detective, and don't let that fear you. To me, that says, that's joyous, because it means there's so many options. You know, there's no one size that fits all for everybody. And I think we can experiment, we can be curious, we can read, we can learn. You know, but at the end of the day, we are the best person to make the decisions about us and about what we eat, what lifestyle we have, and we can trust our intuition around that. And I think empowering, you know, our patients or clients to be the controller, you know, they're the drivers of the wheel. Often we feel we don't know the answers. We have to look to other people all the time, but, you know, empowering our patients to trust their intuition can be a really, really powerful thing. And it can be really protective against all the conflicting advice that's out there, because they will find something that works for them, and then they won't be so swayed when somebody says that they do something different, because that's okay. And it's really important, I think, to understand that difference is not a personal attack on you. Sometimes we get so offended. I certainly have seen it with my clients, you know, their family or their cousins, or they go to a party and, oh, you're not, you know, why are you eating that? Or why aren't you eating dessert? Or, you know, and they get very, very uncomfortable. But, you know, when you see that everyone's only coming from their own thinking, and that's not a reflection of you, that's just where they're at. And that's okay, and it's not personal, and you don't need to take it personally. That just makes it a lot easier to move forward with potential difference, which we're all going to come to, but I think it can be very scary for people when they first start in the low carb space. And you know, obviously remain and be curious, because the journey is going to change. And I think we have to be curious and we have to see how our body responds and go with it. You know, try new things. You know, we're so afraid, I think, to step outside the guidelines or step outside the boundaries. But I have seen the more we can do that and the more we can relax into it and just enjoy it, the more we will actually find what works for us as well. So I just had some final thoughts here that might be helpful. And I guess these are more coming from what I've seen as a coach and what I thought might be helpful for you as a practitioner. So see what lies in front of you and show this to your client and patient too. Look at it as an obstacle rather than an excuse. So obstacles are things that we can overcome. We can go over them, around them, under them, but excuses are dead ends. So that's just a change in thought. It's the same thing in front of us. It's the same barrier or blocker, potential blocker in front of us. But just simply seeing it as an obstacle just creates a lot more freedom for finding solutions. So just that's a really simple one that is very, very helpful. Obviously, practice compassion all the time. You know, your patient sitting there in front of you, I can guarantee you is very, very judgmental, very tough on themselves. You know, the last person they need judging them or not showing compassion is the practitioner sitting in front of them. It can be really hard not to judge. You know, I think it's all a little bit a part of human nature. But I think just seeing that person as someone who is only doing the best they can with the thinking that they've got, you will see so much more potential and possibility for change. So meet your patients where they are and work on small changes rather than overwhelming them with everything at once. Help them set up their support network. It is their responsibility, of course, but you can definitely point them in the right direction and help them to make those connections. Spend time building a relationship where you can with them. I know time can be short and sometimes that's not possible, but if you can't do it, then direct them to someone who can and can really walk beside them while they make these changes. Tell them that you believe in them and that you absolutely know they can do it. Many of these people have very little belief in themselves after years of perceived failures. So a belief from you will do wonders. And as I said, you know, many with so many years of failed diets that they've blamed on themselves. And when we understand what's been going on, it's not their fault. But of course, they do take the blame and they do blame themselves. I think it's really important to tell them that it won't be easy. No change is easy. But like when we first learned to ride a bike, it does get easier. The body will fight, kicking and screaming at first. Expect it, but don't fear it because it's a normal part of change. Tell them they will probably fall off their bike while they're learning, but also while they're a professional. We all do. That's okay because we're all human. So we all have good days, we all have bad days. But I think, you know, we have an expectation that we're not supposed to have bad days. And we think others don't, but everybody does. I have bad days, and certainly going through, you know, what we've all been through with COVID. And I have 5 children and I had them homeschooling for 3 months. And, you know, there were days when it was challenging, but that's normal. And of course, when we see that, often those days are because we're pushing through some mental sludge. I like to call it mental sludge. You know, we want the day to look a certain way and it's not turning out the way we want it to, and we don't like that. But the more we can go with the flow of that and understand that hard days are part of being a human, and that the next day will probably be okay. That's just how it works. So it's falling off is probably going to happen, but it's not the problem. So it's what we tell ourselves that is the problem, when we do fall off. So if we tell ourselves that we're a failure, that we're useless, that we're weak, that we don't have discipline, then we're likely to stay in that feeling for quite a long time. And we may say, look, what's the point? It's not going to work. It's another diet. It's another failed diet. I'm just not going to try. But if we understand that it happens to everybody, it's okay, you can show yourself some compassion, then you're free really to move on as quickly as you let that thought pass. You let that habitual thought that is often been built up over years and years of what you tell yourself when this sort of stuff happens. So we don't have to pay attention to it. We don't have to judge it. We can just move on from it. So tomorrow is always a new day, and we really are only one thought away from seeing something new. And this just means our past actions don't have to define us. They don't. You know, I've had so many messages from people who have fallen off the wagon during COVID. And, you know, I just say to them that, you know, of course, it happened to a lot of people, and that's okay. But you are free in any moment to make change, but just by simply letting go of what you're holding on to, what you think it means about you. It just can flow. It's just thought, and you can start afresh any moment. And all you have to do is take that one step again. It's just that one tiny step. It doesn't mean that everything you've done has been a failure or hasn't worked. It's just take that one step and keep going, one foot in front of the other. And that was kind of all I had. I hope that was really helpful. I guess all I want to see is that there's so much potential. You know, I see the potential in everybody. I have worked in this space now for enough time to know that change is absolutely possible. And a lot of what holds us back is just that habitual stuff that we have. You know, I often talk about it like the backseat driver. Mm-hmm. You know, we've all had a backseat driver in the car. Driving too fast, you're driving too slow, go here, no, do this, blah, blah. It talks and talks and talks away to us. But the beauty of us being the driver is we are the ones with the hands on the wheel and our foot on the pedal. So we have control. It can talk, it can bark instructions, but whether we listen to it or not is actually up to us. And it's so freeing to see that. I mean, it's absolutely changed my life, and it has changed so many of my clients' lives as well, to be able to see that freedom, that they're not broken, they're not fixable. And that's the potential I think that is possible. And I love talking about it. So I hope that was helpful.
And that comes through so clearly. You know, just the fact that you emphasize compassion coming from a place that's non-defensive, non-judgmental, just changes the entire approach. And that has come through so clearly. I think a lot of coaches or practitioners, because there's so much pushback with regards to LCHF, already feel very defensive when it comes to helping and assisting clients. So, you know, you've made such important points. One, realizing that your client's success, or and I'm going to use this very loosely, failure, is not a reflection of you as a coach, and meeting your client where they are and creating a space of non-judgment, and the compassion comes through. I absolutely love that about your entire approach. I just want to take or read some of the comments that have come through. Hasina says, thank you, Tracy, for your deep passion in driving change and sharing knowledge. Your compassion and empathy around cognitive dissonance is so important in sharing this information, and something that is very close to my heart. Tracy, I also think you'll be happy to know that I've been doing push-ups and squats with resistance bands while listening to you.
Very good.
Francois says thank you for being brave enough to share this information, and says thank you for mentioning naturopaths. I'm a naturopathic doctor and work with health coaches like yourself. Thank you so much for sharing that, Francois, and for joining the feed. We've got Richard Turnbull here from Australia as well that says hello, and a few people that have joined later on as well. We've also got Kelly from Perth, Western Australia, and she says the summit was fantastic. I've got a question from Hasina. She says she loves your work, loves your Facebook posts. She loved the virtual summit that we'll talk about in just a bit. Question, what have you found to be the biggest challenge for keto women during the pandemic, and what has been your approach to support your clients in this regard?
Yeah. Just as I was kind of saying at the end, I think just being really hard on ourselves, that's been the big challenge. I think it's been such a change, you know, for women who, most of them work as well as being mums, and then trying to work with kids at home. And then, you know, this perfectionist thing, I think, just comes up so much in women in particular. And you know, I really try and unravel so much of that, because it doesn't exist, and it's all made up. And what is perfection? There is no such thing. I mean, we are all just doing the best we can. And I think, you know, as I said, some days are harder than others, and some days were harder than others. But whether it's going through COVID or just life, it's like that. You know, we do have days that are harder than others. And I think it's what we tell ourselves when that happens that really, really matters. And that's kind of what I share with my clients, that there's nothing you can do about what's done. It's done. I mean, if you had a day or a week or even a month where, you know, you didn't eat the way that you wanted to, you know, you weren't low carb, you were emotional eating because you were bored, because you were at home. I mean, all those other challenges, well, that's okay, that's done. But you are going to be free to, I guess, see that you don't have to keep living in that. That change can come with a change of thought. And, you know, often it stays that longer because we are feeling so bad about doing that. And we think that there's something wrong with that, but there's not. You know, there's no rules around how we deal with life. There's no rules around how we deal with pandemics. I mean, certainly no one I don't think there's anyone living that has been through this. And, you know, obviously people have lived through wars, and, you know, there's been some terrible things that have gone on, and there will always continue to be challenges and things. But I think we just have to know that we're always doing the best we can. And what is the biggest thing that brings change is awareness. And when we're caught up in habitual stuff, we don't have a lot of space for new thought and to see things differently. And as I said, I think that's the bulk of my work. So the people that stay in my world, and a lot of my clients, they know the science better than I do. You know, like it's not about that, but it is about having compassion for ourselves and just seeing that change isn't as hard as we think it is. And a lot of it just comes to this understanding habitual stuff. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you so much for that answer, Tracy. I just want to ask you as well, just on behalf of coaches and advisors out there, in terms of creating and providing support for your clients outside of the session, you know, you always need to strike a really good balance to not want to do the work for them and not want to be a crutch or disempower them in any way. But what kinds of support do you provide for your clients, or what would you advise as enough support for your clients outside of the session to help keep them accountable?
Yes, so that's quite tricky, because I think I kind of just work with my intuition around that. I don't have any rules around that for myself, because I think every client is going to need something a little bit different. And I'm very supportive, especially in the early days, because what I do find in the first month is they probably require a little bit more support, and they can text me and If they need to catch up, then they can book in an appointment. And then I've got an online booking thing that can just book an appointment anytime. And I kind of say in that first month, I'm here, you know, because it might be in the supermarket. There's something might come up and they're just not sure of the answer in the early days. But what I do get them to do, obviously, over the time, is to start trusting themselves.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm there, but do they have the answers first? And 9 times out of 10, they do. So my job is for them not to need me. I have a lot of people in my circle because I've become friends. We create a relationship that goes to another level. But if they come back to me in a coaching capacity, that's very different. So I see friendship and coaching is very, very different. So, you know, you need someone as a coach who can really see a way out, can see the potential of where they are, can show them compassion, but can still point them to the way out and can be there with them as they walk out beside you. So, yeah, I mean, as I said, I don't mind. I say to them, you can text me, but I've never had a text in the middle of the night from a client. I don't mind if they text me on a Saturday. You know, if I'm with my family, I'll respond when I get to it. They know, there's obviously priorities on a weekend. But I think just knowing that somebody is there is enough. And yes, just learning that they probably do actually have the answers themselves anyway as well. And it's just having that practice and gaining that confidence in that.
I love that. I love that you said that is in empowering them in knowing that they have the answers. And a lot of people are so doubtful of themselves, especially initially when, like you said, there's so much information and becomes so overwhelming. It's so easy to doubt yourself. So I love that approach. Thank you for sharing that. I just wanted to talk about the virtual summit that you hosted. It was such a fantastic lineup, and it was an all-woman lineup. Why was this important to you?
Okay, well, as I said, you know, I've built relationships with a lot of female GPs and practitioners in the space, and predominantly that came from my podcast. So I started a podcast about 18 months ago, and I have to say all this came from that. You know, I built relationships with a lot of women in the space, and a lot of them were saying the same thing, in that there was a lot of the low carb space was really dominated by men, yet a lot of the people turning up were women. So it's mostly women that are really interested, yet there wasn't a lot of females at grassroots level sharing their knowledge and their wisdom. So that was kind of why it came up. And it was I was talking with one of the GPs here in Melbourne, and she said something like, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if we did an all-female one? And I'm like, yeah, that'd be fantastic. Imagine that, blah, blah, blah. And we left it at that. And then, you know, it was probably a week later, I just woke up and, you know, as happens, you just get inspired. Something, you know, it's like, yes, you have to do it. You have to do this, Tracy, because you are the one that has the contacts and the connections. And you can reach out to, you know, I had probably 20 women in my head I could reach out to. And I just did that. I said, look, I've got this idea, virtual. I'm not doing a face-to-face one. That's not, you know, it's beyond what my capacity is, but I'm thinking of doing a virtual all-female one with practitioners who work every day in the space with women and who can share their knowledge and their wisdom from that, you know, from what they know. What do you think? Oh, yes. And I know so-and-so, and I know so-and-so, and it just went from there. And it was just overwhelming, you know, the response from the presenters interested in being involved. And of course, you know, that they put their heart and their soul into their presentations, and they're all different. And I said to all of them, I'm not technical. I don't even know how I figured out how to do a podcast, only that YouTube is amazing. It taught me, but I can't edit. I don't know that. I do have an 18-year-old son, and he did help me with a lot, you know, stuff when I did need it. But I said, you need to do it yourself and just send it to me, and I will work out how to do it. and I will work something out. And I did, and yeah, it was just fantastic. And I think the feedback was so wonderful that it was from a female perspective, and it was from women working every day with women, seeing the real issues, and all of them showed compassion, you know, and but wisdom from real, you know, just women working in the space. So yeah, that's why.
It was such a phenomenal event, and I just have to commend you for your bravery. I mean, just by hosting an event like this, and all the speakers that were brave enough to, you know, join you on this platform, I think it just gives permission to other practitioners to feel safe and comfortable enough in practicing LCHF openly and going against the grain. So from all of us at the Nutrition Network, thank you so much for your bravery and your courage. Especially that, you know, you're part of the Nutrition Network practitioners list. You've done a few of our courses, you've done the advisor course, you've done our ethics course. How do you find that these trainings have supported you in your role as a coach?
Yeah, very supportive. I think the first ones I did was the low carb keto professional training or something like. Yes, that was the first one I did, and because I'd done that, I was able to do that because of my Banting coach. I think that we were reached out to through the Real Meal Revolution to do that, and I love the format. I love the information. It's just so up to date. I mean, Tim Noakes was one of my people. He was my first, you know, person, you know, 7 years ago that changed my life. So I guess he's, you know, as I said, you find the people that you trust, and he is my man. So, you know, there was just no way I was going to look anywhere else. And I did the advisor training, yes, after that, and it was just fantastic. I loved how it brought in, you know, a lot of the change stuff and a lot of the support, because it can be lonely and it can be quite an isolating position. And I think, you know, you really do have to work very hard. I think, you know, if you're doing this to make some money, it can be challenging. Number one, I think being female, I don't like charging people money. You know, we do it because we love it. We do it because we want to help people. But, you know, of course, it's nice to make an income as well. But they're all the challenges, I think, that I've had to sort of work through. But you build relationships, you do it because you love it, you do it because you believe in it. And I think it will work out the way it's meant to work out, maybe not the way you want it to, but I think that's how life sort of happens, and you can open yourself up to a whole lot of new things. I mean, gosh, if you'd have said to me 6 months ago I would have done this summit, I would have told you, oh, are you kidding? Absolutely no way. How would I pull off something like that? And sometimes I still think, you know, how have I done the podcast? And I don't know, I just think, you know, you learn when you understand all this stuff that I used to tell myself, that I couldn't do stuff and I wasn't confident. And well, confidence is in all of us. We've all got it. And seeing beyond the habitual stuff means we'll just do things, and, you know, how they turn out is how they turn out. So yeah, I mean, I love the Nutrition Network stuff. So I highly recommend it to everyone, and thank you for your support.
So much for all your passion and the compassion that you pour in everything that we do. I think that comes across so strongly. Before we conclude, is there anything that you'd like to share with our viewers?
Anything to share? Yeah, I just think, you know, there's so much potential and there's so much possibility. I think we can see the world in so many different ways, but when we look for hope, and when we look for the beautiful things, you know, we will see that as well. And as I said, I don't look at any client sitting in front of me and not see the potential. And I think if you can see it in your patients and in your clients, they'll start to see it in themselves as well. And yeah, just don't give up.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Tracy, for making yourself available at this time. I've said it before, it is so humbling for us to see the caliber of practitioners that the Nutrition Network pulls with its trainings. We absolutely commend you for your insight, for the light that you bring, the passion, the compassion that you bring to everything that you do. So thank you so much for that. I want to thank all of our viewers as well for joining in the discussion, for your questions, your comments. If you found this helpful, please feel free to share this widely. If you'd like to contact Tracy, I've got a link to her website in the description box. If you'd like access to the virtual summit, it's still available. The link is also shared in the description box. Again, thank you all for joining us. We will see you guys next week for another session. If you're not watching this live, it's going to be part of our video resources, so you can access this at any time. From all of us here at the Nutrition Network, thank you, Tracy, so much. And thank you to everybody for joining. We'll see you again next week. Take care. Be safe. Bye-bye.